Welcome back to another episode of Light the Fuse, the only and therefore greatest Mission Impossible podcast on the internet. Once again, this is Drew Taylor, joined by Charles Hood.
Hello.
And this week we have a very, very special guest, Patrick Willems, who has made some amazing YouTube videos about the series. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me.
We wanted to ask you about one video in particular, your Ethan Hunt the Man. I was wondering if you could just run that down and sort of tell us what your thesis was in that video.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, this video came up while I was making my previous Mission Impossible video, which is just sort of a crash course on why the entire franchise is great. And while rewatching all the movies, I started thinking a lot about Ethan Hunt's characterization through, at the time, all 5 films and how it's loose. It, he, especially in like the first 3 movies, seems like a completely different person in each of them. And so I thought it might be fun to really dig into that and try to figure out, because they all are technically in the same continuity, but to try to figure out how this character changed from one film to another and what and just like try to explore his psychology and see if there is any sort of arc running through all the movies in terms of because this is one character. He is the one character that kind of the one link between all the movies. So yeah, I basically just tried to figure out who the hell this guy is.
And what did you come up with?
Well, okay, that's a kind of there's a long answer to that question, and I've got to.
We should also tell people to watch the video because it is a fantastic breakdown.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Since we have you here, we'll have you explain it too.
Yeah, essentially, he especially if you go back to like the first movie where and you go into try to dig into like what little bits they give you about his past. He is this kind of weird, emotionally stunted guy with like. You know, it seems like his father died early on, and then in the first movie, his one father figure betrays him and then dies. And so this is a guy who seems to have like no close relationships, but then whenever he will meet or like a new person, he will latch onto them in a really intense way. And he sort of like he changes and morphs as the series goes on. Like in the third movie, he tries to be a real person and then realizes that he can't be a real person. And after that, he just throws himself, like, almost psychotically into his job, where he is, and I will say my thesis has changed a little bit post-Fallout, but especially looking at Rogue Nation, Ethan Hunt is a crazy person, and that's really where it seemed like it had all been building to, and his teammates are slowly realizing that he is a crazy person who values the mission above all else and will do anything and will like constantly risk his own life just to complete the mission. He will win at any cost. He's a man for whom failure is not an option.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, Charles and I have talked about this. We think that the whole relationship with his job has something to do with Brad Bird's involvement in the fourth one, because Bird's movies are always about like the push and pull between family and work.
Right.
But yeah, in Fallout, they seem to directly address this kind of the pathology of his having to save the world, which is interesting. So tell us how things changed when you finally saw Fallout.
Yeah. So Fallout was interesting because obviously it brought, it did bring back the Julia element that had been away for a while, and really like kind of wove that directly into it. And so the whole thing with Ethan in that movie, it kind of became less him just being a crazy person who needs to win and more him just having this really obsessive belief that there is a better way and that everyone can be saved and that compromises don't need to be made. And but it added this element of sort of tragedy to the character that I found really interesting, in that he kind of, because his purpose on Earth is to save everybody. He can't be held he can't have like regular human relationships, and so Fallout kind of really felt like the culmination of everything that his characterization had been building toward, which is kind of why I think it should maybe be the last movie in the series, because I feel like kind of wraps up that character perfectly. And then, of course, and one of the other sort of like co-thesis of the video I made is about how, I mean, and this is not like like a surprising thing to say, but Ethan Hunt is very much Tom Cruise himself in terms of who Tom Cruise wants to be, who he realizes the public perceives him as. And I think Ethan Hunt has changed in regards to Cruise's career at different points and his image. And so yeah, and I think the sort of subtext or like meta commentary of Fallout is it's about Tom Cruise's way of working. If that makes any sense, in the way that, he does all his own stunts. He demands the movies be shot on film. He makes them in a very specific way that is more difficult than most movies are made because he believes it to be better. And and much of Fallout is about how Ethan Hunt has his way of doing things that is more difficult, but he believes that it will save the most people, and everyone else kind of doubts it. But the movie is about how his way will work, and he can do it, and it's the best way, sort of like how Tom Cruise makes these movies.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking to Lauren about this, right, Charles? That how, this new movie really feels like a metaphor for how they make those movies, because they don't know where it's going to go when they start making it. They don't know how they're going to get there. What is that saying, Charles, that you always bring up, that McQuarrie says?
Well, yeah, McQuarrie definitely put a lot of, I think, Ethan Hunt or himself into Ethan Hunt. Like, there's always Ethan's always making comments like, "We'll make it work. We'll figure it out." Like he goes in without a plan. He's completely improvising, and you hear the way McQuarrie makes this movie. I was going to say both movies, but I think he learned more so with Fallout to do it this way, where he goes. They didn't even have a completed script when they made the movie. He had a beginning and an ending, and he was sort of making up the middle as he went along. So I think it's a sort of a parallel. McQuarrie made it personal that way.
Well, what does he say? The mission tells you. What does he say?
Oh, McQuarrie. Yeah, he says, something like mission tells you what to do. Like you can't force your own will onto Mission Impossible. It sort of guides you on its own.
Right. Did you sort of feel validated by Fallout because it was such a it seemed to play into your thesis sort of so well?
In a way, yeah. It felt really satisfying watching that and just being like, oh, okay, like McQuarrie has also clearly thought as much about Ethan Hunt as I have. And more so, obviously, because he's making these movies and he spent years thinking about it. And I did find it interesting because, like, in watching Rogue Nation, which actually I'll get into this more later, but Rogue Nation, watching that movie, I totally feel like Ethan Hunt is a lunatic. He's a man out of his mind, and you look at like Benji's reactions to him as the movie goes on, and he's so obsessive, and he seems genuinely crazy. And then Fallout does recontextualize that a little bit by like adding different shading to it, and just like sort of just digging a bit deeper into his psychology. And I especially because I saw that movie maybe, I don't know, a couple weeks after I released that video, and it felt very validating just to be like, okay, great. This I'm glad I made that video, and this feels like a payoff after having thought so much about this one topic.
I think that whole thread too of we're just talking about the importance of Ghost Protocol in this series and how it really got it on its current track. The whole thread of Ethan being a crazy person, I think, kind of started in Ghost Protocol with the Burge scene when he's out on the side of the building, and they keep commenting on how insane he is for doing it. When Paula Patton comes in the room and she's like, "Where's Ethan?" That kind of stuff. I feel like in the third movie when he's doing the jump and everything, they're just kind of like, they talk about how hard it is, but they're not really talking about how crazy Ethan is for doing it until Ghost Protocol, and then they've just, with each movie, they've escalated that even more.
Right, there's that kind of recurring thing where they'll realize how insane and impossible the thing they have to do is, and then how no one could possibly do it, and they all just kind of look at him, and like there's that moment when they realize that they have to go in through the outside of the Burj Khalifa in Ghost Protocol, and they all look at him, and he kind of seems like he kind of sighs a little bit, like, yeah, I know that I'm gonna do this. I'm not really looking forward to it, but yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, there's also that great moment that I always talk about when he's in the car with Paula Patton, and she's like, the missile's gonna launch in 3 minutes, and we're 5 minutes out, and he kind of gives that shrug, like, well, we'll figure it out. And it's just, it really encapsulates so much of him as a person in that little moment.
And especially, like, even if you look at the beginning of Ghost Protocol, I mean, especially coming off of the previous movie where, you know, he has a normal, like, human relationship. He gets married. It seems like he kind of goes off happily with his wife at the end. And then this movie, he's just been in a prison for like 6 months, right? Just like he's thrown himself into this mission so obsessively, and no one has even really had any communication with him.
Yeah, and he doesn't even know what the end of that mission is supposed to be. I mean, he's
Right.
as surprised about them breaking him out as anybody.
Yeah. And so like right away, like they realized that they were like taking the character in a different direction. And yeah, you're totally right. That's the sort of beginning of the track that they've been on for the past 3 movies.
Do you think part of that kind of distillation of him as a character helps that I feel like in Fallout we finally get a villain that is sort of his equal and is sort of menacing enough that you can believe that he would really obsess over these things the way that he does?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially just like I'm having Henry Cavill's character there as like a foil to him, even before he really becomes the villain. You know, he's the guy who keeps being like, oh no, we can just like he kills the people instead of just there's a part where they're having the conversation about like, they're trying to like find more information about, you know, the apostles, and Ethan's like, well, if you didn't kill everybody you encountered, we would actually have someone to talk to. And yeah, like he basically seems there as like the counter to, he's the other easier way of doing things. And while Ethan has like the better way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when you say that too,
the better, harder way.
yeah, and that it really is the way that they make these movies. Nobody's shooting on film anymore. No one's falling out of airplanes or hanging off of buildings, and no one does that anymore.
Right.
The easy way, the you know, Henry Cavill way is CGI and this and that, and these movies really are the Ethan Hunt way of making this type of film.
Oh yeah, totally.
So you loved Fallout, correct?
Yes, I very much did.
So you said that you would think that this would be a good place to end, but where do you have any ideas about where you would want to see the character go, or aspects of the character that have yet to be explored in these movies that you think are worth sort of digging into?
I mean, you talk about this a bit in your video, but I guess we'd like to hear more of that.
Yeah, so I think it was after Rogue Nation came out, I had this thought about like, okay, I want there to be like one more movie. I think they should bring in like Johnny To to direct it, and it's like age up Ethan so he's a bit older, and maybe just like kill off his entire team at the beginning and have it just be sort of like one more like bleak like revenge mission, and just like wrap up the series like on this kind of like downer, more adult note. And but that's and then and now looking at it now, I feel like, oh, that's just like, I mean, this movie hadn't come out at the time, but now it just seems like that's the Logan like approach to it.
Right.
And I'm not sure I really need that now, although after Fallout, while it does seem like so much a conclusion of what they've been doing for the past several movies, it's almost like I mean, who knows, maybe it'll happen, but to me it seems like it would be odd to have Macquarie return to direct again, because this does feel just like the ending of like what they'd been doing. And also you do have to think about how so much of the series is based around Cruise doing insane stunts, and he's currently 56 years old, and you know, I mean, he's a very impressive guy. I don't know how much more time he has to do stuff like this. And so I feel like, for me, if they're going to continue the series, I would like to see just one more movie, and I would like them to maybe age him up a little bit, do a bit of a time jump, and honestly just sort of like not an epilogue to the series, but just sort of like one final standalone mission. And I think a unique thing to do would be to make him a little bit older, maybe have a slightly new status quo, just change things around a little bit, bring in a new director. I would personally like my picks for director are Gore Verbinski, Park Chan-wook, or Bong Joon-ho. Get one of those Korean guys in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we've spent so much time with Ethan Hunt, super agent, doing his job really well. We've seen him try to be a regular kind of family man, and then we saw why that didn't really work. And so I think the sort of logical place to take the character is have him sort of maybe like retiring from field duty or like near the end of his career. And yeah, and just like a little bit past middle age, and do something with that, because I feel like the current model has been explored so thoroughly.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, about having him be like the Phelps type character.
Oh yeah.
In the next one, he maybe is overseeing a new team and something happens to them, or something like that.
I think they'll make that movie, but it won't be for after a couple more sequels, at least. I think Cruise is still going 100 miles an hour, and it won't be until he loses a step, and it doesn't seem like that's happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, he is going to have to, he's going to come up against a wall of what he physically can accomplish.
Yeah, and when that happens, that's when they'll make the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of why he wanted to make Jack Reacher a franchise, because that's not quite as reliant on him doing huge, insane, life-threatening stunts, and that he could actually keep doing like as he got older and like aged out of doing the mission stuff. Because he clearly like wants a franchise that can go on. But also, I mean, like I have spent far too much time just thinking about Tom Cruise's career in general, which I find so fascinating. And as much as I love the mission movies, I keep hoping that he will at some point sort of shift back into doing some more dramas, and not exclusively action stuff, because it's obviously not the late 90s anymore, but he had that long run where he was working with all the best directors and doing like this huge variety of roles, and like he's great at action, but I miss seeing him in movies like Jerry Maguire or Magnolia or Collateral and stuff like that. And I keep hoping
I would love to see him work with Paul Thomas Anderson again.
Oh my God, yeah. And so I love the mission movies, but I hope he doesn't just double down and be like, okay, great, let's make like one every 2 years or so. Like, I want these to be special and not just all he does.
Yeah, we're going to have Amy Nicholson, who I'm sure you've read before.
She wrote the book on Tom Cruise.
She literally wrote the book on Tom Cruise, and she thinks that the Mission Impossible movies like ruined his career, basically.
It's funny. I was actually just listening to a podcast she was on recently, and of course, Cruise came up, and I know she's very big on how he should stop working with Macquarie, which I strongly disagree with her on.
Right. Especially because he's writing Top Gun 2 right now, so since
Cruise decided that he wants to do action, if he's going to do action, I want him to work with Macquarie. I don't think Macquarie is making the choices of what movies Cruise is going to make, because he can pretty much do what he wants. And I do think she is partly right in terms of him making the calculated shift toward action after like 2005 and 6. When I think general audiences had maybe a tougher time buying him as like ordinary like people. And so like I totally get that, but I think most of his best action movies in this era of his career have been with Macquarie. So I'm cool with that
in
collaboration.
one form or another, right? Because Macquarie wrote Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. Macquarie.
Edge of Tomorrow is one of his best, I think, of the recent years.
I think that's one of the best of his career. I think that's kind of a nice companion piece to Jerry Maguire, actually, in terms of the characters have very similar arcs, and they handle Tom Cruise's just movie star persona in a similar way. Where he starts out as like the hotshot guy, then has everything like stripped away from him, and then has to learn to like become the better version of who he thought he was at the beginning.
Well, the greatest thing about that movie is that at the beginning he's a coward.
Yeah,
right.
And
but he seems like a really confident guy.
I love that the whole first act. He's kind of a hotshot, but he's a coward, which I just think is so great.
Exactly, and so like I do want Cruise to shift away from so exclusively action. But when he makes action movies, they should absolutely keep being with Macquarie, because they work well together.
Yeah, and there aren't that many people doing a lot of great action these days.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe they'll have another great Jack Reacher in them too, because I'm a big fan of the first one, and I was very disappointed that the second one fucked everything up so completely. But
I still haven't seen it. I've seen like almost every Cruise movie, but that was one of the few I skipped in theaters.
yeah, you're not missing anything. I mean, McQuarrie even recently admitted that they went too far into the character too quickly.
He said that, was it on one of the Empire interviews?
Yes, yeah, which is what I felt too. It's like, why are we saddling this guy with like a kid and all this backstory and stuff when he was so cool?
Didn't they pick like the 19th book in the series?
Yeah, it was crazy how deep they went so quickly. But I still think it's a great character for Cruise and worth exploring if they kind of like reset it somehow.
Right.
But it'll probably be like an Amazon original show next.
Exactly.
Sure.
I think I got way too excited when there was the rumors that he was in talks for a role in Tarantino's new movie.
Yeah, which role did he pass on?
I got so excited
Charles?
too.
He passed on one of he passed on I think the Brad Pitt part.
Yeah, he was. I think he was pretty close to doing it, or at least Tarantino was trying to get him to do it.
Like that is the collaboration that I want to see happen, and because Tarantino tends to bring out the best in actors, and or will use them in a way they haven't been used before. And I was like, that's what Cruise needs right now. That would be so perfect.
Yeah,
that was a real heartbreak that didn't happen. I think if they had made it with Paramount, he probably would have been more inclined to do it. But
true.
Well, there was kind of a turning point in Cruise's career. We've talked about this a little bit in an earlier episode, but like around Mission Impossible 3, where Cruise sort of took more control, I think, of his projects and stopped giving himself over to big name alpha directors. And I don't know what it was that shifted it, but maybe it was after War of the Worlds, and there was some controversy in his career with Katie Holmes stuff or whatever. But it seems like since then,
just recently,
he's
I was
hired
reading about
more
how
directors that he can be like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, just recently, I was reading about. I was learning about how he and Spielberg apparently had a big conflict on the War of the Worlds press tour, and that's why they haven't worked together again.
Oh, really?
Right? Yeah, I've heard about that before.
Yeah, and just sort of like personal conflicts, and if you dig on the internet, you can find stuff about it. But yeah, apparently that went from a great collaboration to a kind of hostile one, and so that seemed like the end of that. But yeah, like he has definitely stopped turning himself over to these directors, and I keep just like praying that one day there will be a big like a Cruise profile for some publication where he'll like open up about some stuff, but I know it's never going to happen.
Yeah, I would maybe like towards the end of his life and career, he'll hire somebody to write like a definitive biography, but he is someone who controls his image so well that
he won't even like voice an opinion on a movie. Have you ever seen this where he's asked like, what movies have you been enjoying or have you liked recently? Because he watches a movie a day. He sees everything. And then he'll just talk about how like his love of the theatrical experience and how much he adores cinema as an art form, and he won't name a single film that he's seen.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I've seen things about that, and I think it's a more recent development. We're starting to do research. We're going to do making of episodes for each of the movies, and I started going to. There's a cinema library out here in LA where you can pull every single article that was ever written. They have a whole archive of them, and I found a couple articles where he's talking about some different movies that he's a big fan of. He talks about The Third Man being a movie that he loves. He talks about The Sting was a movie he loved growing up. So I feel like that is like a narrative now, and I think maybe it's a thing now that it's just sort of a funny joke that he won't talk about movies specifically, but he has in the past.
Well, I remember, I think it might have been 3 or 4 years ago, he was on the Nerdist podcast, and he was asked, what, just oh, you watch a movie every day. What have you enjoyed recently? And he gave this long answer where he didn't, he would, even when pressed, he would not name a single film. And that's when I started, when I discovered this, and then I've every time I read an interview with him, I always look for like a part where he's asked about this, and he never names it. There was one last year. I think he was promoting American Made, and he was asked about watching movies, and he And he did give an answer, but he said that he and McHugh will hang out and be like, oh yeah, we'll put on like Once Upon a Time in the West or Singin' in the Rain. And so the only movies he'll name are really old films where like everyone involved in them is dead.
Yeah, I was up at Pixar a couple weeks ago, and of course, the second I got in the room with Brad Bird, I was like, I have a Mission Impossible podcast, and we want you to, come on. But he was like, yeah, that Tom Cruise knows more about movies than anybody. He knows them back to front. He talked about Harold Lloyd and, Speedy and all these things, and it is sort of a shame that he doesn't talk more about the movies that he's watching and enjoying and what he takes from those movies to make the movies that we see him in.
Yeah, there's this I quoted this in one of the videos I made, but one of my favorite lines just about Cruise in movies is from an interview with Robert Elswit, who is the cinematographer on Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation. And
yes, we love him.
I mean, he's one of the best. And he said he was just talking about working with Cruise, and because Cruise is the only actor who like demands that his movies are shot on film, which is fascinating. Like he has the same pull that like Christopher Nolan does when it comes to that stuff. And
it's smart. I mean, actors look better on film. I mean, it's just digital has because it can take so much out of your face. It can get every little pore and everything in it, and it can make you look worse than you actually look in some ways if it's not lit right.
Absolutely.
I mean, digital obviously could be beautiful, but film will always make an actor's face look better, I think.
Right. And Cruise Elsbeth says Tom Cruise has a visceral hatred of the digital image. And I was like, wow, you will never hear Cruise say that himself in an interview. But here it is, this guy who has worked with him multiple times saying it. And I'm like, this is the information that I live for.
That's fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah, he can probably tell you all about film stocks and all of these things, and has really strong opinions that he will just never voice publicly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be one of the reasons why he feels more comfortable these days working with maybe less experienced directors or people who aren't as established, because he knows the business backwards and forwards. He knows how to shoot things and how performances are captured. So, I mean, maybe he's just reached that point where he can kind of do it all. I would love to see him direct a movie one day and see what that looks like.
This is a thing. I've had a lot of conversations with friends about this, like if Cruise is ever going to direct, because pretty much every actor of his stature has. And what it's really seemed like to me is that because he knows everything about every aspect of the production, but it's like he knows that there are better directors, and as good as he might be, he knows there are better ones, and he wants to work with them. And so that's the only answer that I've found, just because obviously there was the long time where he would only work with the best directors. And I guess it's funny because you'd think he would be just like, oh yeah, I finally gotten to the point where I could even be the cinematographer and probably compose the score myself as well. But I know that, there are more skilled, more experienced filmmakers who will create a better finished product. I don't know. That's all I come up with.
It's interesting. I found pulling articles for the first Mission Impossible movie, there was a few things talking about him wanting to direct for the first time, and how he's saying he's going to do it soon. This is back in '96.
Whoa!
And he was saying, "Oh, this movie wasn't right for me to be my first movie to direct." And it's fascinating to read the quotes about Mission Impossible and where it was before it was a big blockbuster and what people were saying about it and stuff. So it's been a fun process to do that research.
That's also wild because he was saying that in '96, and then you look at the string of people he worked with at right after that, and it's Paul Thomas Anderson and Stanley Kubrick and Spielberg. And so yeah, instead of directing himself, he worked with just the very best in the world.
Maybe he was this seems like such a pain in the ass that I have no interest in doing this anymore. Being locked in Stanley Kubrick's, walk-in refrigerator for 2 years was enough for me. I don't know.
Well, I feel like we still have more to talk about. Maybe we should split this into 2 episodes. Is that cool with you both?
Yeah, let's do it.
Totally.
I just want to say before we go that you probably know some of Patrick's work on the internet. I'm sure you've probably seen like his really funny video that's the X-Men movie as if directed by Wes Anderson. You've probably seen that. That went viral. I also just wanted to say, Patrick, that I love some of the other videos you've made, like you have a video saying that Mask of the Phantasm is the best Batman movie. I think that's a great video. I also love the Marvel's ugly color grading video. And
I love all your Last Jedi videos, Charles, you idiot.
I'm not a huge fan of Last Jedi. I think it's good. I really like it. I think it's the best of the new Star Wars movies. But I think you're doing God's work when you make the HBO is ruining movies video, which I think everybody needs to watch.
Thank you very much.
We need a video though in your Blue Flame special episodes about John McTiernan, our buddy and the light of our lives in many ways.
Oh, that's a good idea. Well, because I just did one about Cameron.
Yeah, that one was great.
Oh, please do one on John McTiernan. He's my favorite director.
I mean, McTiernan rules.
Yeah, he's amazing.
I did bring...
And so underrated.
I brought him up in the Cameron one, and I think there is overlap to their approaches, basically in the sense of, like, they don't have necessarily a distinctive action style, but there is this, like, really excellent craft and, like, focus on storytelling that makes their action movies so good. So I would just have to find, like... This is just an excuse to rewatch like all the great McTiernan movies and find an interesting angle on how he shoots action.
Yeah, so
he stages and frames action better than anybody, in my opinion. I think he tells the story with the camera better than anybody, even outside of action. I mean, I base basically all of my directing that I do. I just went to the John McTiernan Film School listening to his commentaries and just studying his movies. That's how I love to shoot stuff.
Charles is basically a hack, so...
He's great. And also, one great thing about a lot of McTiernan movies is he had Jan de Bont as a cinematographer on a bunch of them, and I really miss movies shot by Jan de Bont.
Yeah.
He has such a good look. Like whether he was working with like Verhoeven or McTiernan, but just like his reds are like the reddest reds.
Oh,
I love
like Hunt for Red October. I mean, everybody talks about Die Hard, and I feel like people neglect Hunt for Red October, which Drew and I should do a podcast about Hunt for Red October. We talk about it.
People would love that.
But let's sign off and we'll start again, and we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah, see you then.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. If you'd like to watch the original Mission Impossible television show, all 7 seasons are currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.